Okay, thanks so much to Brendan from PoolTogether for joining today for this meetup. This will be shorter than our normal recordings if you're checking this out on YouTube after the fact, but very excited to hear about an intro to PoolTogether and a little bit about the new V3 contracts. So thanks again, and take it away, Brendan.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Good to be here. So I'm not sure where everyone stands in terms of what they know. So I'm going to start from scratch. I'm going to rip through our intro slides just to kind of explain what prize savings are, and then we'll talk about V3 and what's new, what's kind of upcoming. So could I access screen sharing?
Indeed. Let me just change that. Okay, you should be able to now.
Cool. And if you guys can't see it, let me know, but it should be good to go. So if I go full screen, can everyone still see this? Yep. Okay. I'm seeing.
Looks good.
I guess there are a lot of muted people. So, so prize-linked savings. What is it? Essentially, it's a savings account such that every dollar you deposit is a chance to win the prize, and the prize is the interest that accrues on all the deposits. So this is also known as a lossless lottery. Everyone is effectively buying tickets by depositing funds. Those give them proportional chances to win a prize that is the interest that's accrued. So a typical account has 0.35%, let's say, APR, very, very low. If you deposit like $100, you might get a couple pennies over the year. And so what's cool about PoolTogether is that you deposit any amount and you have a chance of winning a much larger amount. Granted, there are some opportunity costs, but the upside is so big just to be in it, for the chance to win that, which is like potentially thousands of % greater than what you put in. And it's actually a really old idea. All these countries and more have had prize-linked savings accounts. And quite often, because it's like a lottery system, it is run by the government typically. But now, thanks to these trustless, autonomous escrow contracts, these smart contracts, we can easily implement these safely and autonomously. So the biggest one in the world is the premium UK bonds. They have about $100 billion deposited in them, over 20 million different accounts, and they award $1.3 billion in prizes every year. But they actually generate about 10 billion in revenue, but 9 billion approximately goes towards public services in the UK because it's a government-run project. So it's kind of an interesting split between public service and benefit and the kind of chance to win as an individual. And so this kind of makes a lot of sense for your fork because potentially, it could actually fund the Chicago meetup, and maybe a fraction could go towards one of you. So it's a neat system that is already applied in that same kind of fashion. And so we can see that, so the prize savings, the UK premium bond started, I think, back in the 50s. And what's funny is that they have very much the same language. It's, you don't risk a penny by being in it, and you can get your money back whenever you want. That value prop has not changed. And so the economics, like I was referring to before, are really cool because typically if you have like a savings account, the interest is super low, but the risk is super low as well. And this gradient runs all the way through to, say, a startup, where it's incredibly high risk and the potential for reward is really high. The potential reward is very high as well. But prize-linked savings is interesting because it's very low risk, but the upside is super high. And so what we've seen in people's deposits is that most people you got to be in it. You got to have something in it. You got to have some chance because the upside is so high. So the cool thing is you don't have to choose between safety and reward. You can have both. Easy peasy. And so here's the example I was referring to. We have had a user who had 10 DAI deposited for about 30 days, or she, potentially. And they won 1,659 DAI, which is a massive return off what they put in. So it's a good idea just to have something in it. You just got to be in it to win. And so what we really love about prize savings is that through these yield services like Compound, we can expose this amazing machine to the world through a very simple product, which is prize savings. It's simply this idea of a lossless lottery. And we can build this on top of any of these yield generating services. So we can take advantage of these crypto yields and really be a very compelling value to the end user without letting them know, hey, how does this work? They don't have to know how Compound works. They don't have to know how it's over collateralized and very, very low risk. They just get to leverage the yield that's coming off of it. So we think prize savings is really awesome, and it works really well on Ethereum. And there's so many reasons for this. I won't get into this now, but this is just the intro portion. So after this, I'm going to get into a bit of technical around V3. I'm just ripping through this really fast. But does anyone have any questions off the bat?
If anyone does, feel free to unmute, or if you're feeling shy, throw them in the chat. You can ask.
Yeah, I'll bring up the chat. Feeling good? Okay, cool. So what's happening in V3? Well, V2 is interesting because it was like a product. It was mostly a product. It was a product before it was a protocol. And so we have streamlined it for end user ease of use rather than developer convenience. And so with V3, we're transitioning more to a protocol because we want this to be extremely extensible and decentralized so that anybody can use it and build off of it. And so there's three pillars to this, really: extensibility, usability, and decentralization. And so the extensibility it's pretty straightforward. We want more yield sources. So we love Compound, and we've been building on Compound for ages. But now there's other really interesting projects such as Aave that we'd like to use that also provide yield services. It has a slightly different mechanism, but it's proven itself to be a reliable source of yield. And then we'd also like to have custom prizes. Like, imagine if you could award NFTs as part of the prize, or just arbitrary ERC20 tokens. You can just pile everything in, and then when you hit reward, it gives them the interest as well as all these fun little bits and bobs, sort of like the POAP NFT that you guys just received. Something else that's coming in V3 is custom pods. So if any of you recall, like with an office, there's often like an office lottery pool where everyone puts in a couple bucks and they buy all these tickets together. It's the exact same concept in that we allow people to combine their PoolTogether tickets. And so you can actually have, and you can do this trustlessly. So you can have a much greater chance of winning just a share of the prize. And so what's cool about that is it introduces a spectrum between the like maximum risk, maximum reward, all the way through to virtually interest. Because if everybody's part of the pod and the pod wins every time, it's effectively interest. So it's kind of introduces this interesting spectrum between the two extremes. And then finally, we're introducing referral rewards for V3. And we're really excited about this. This is something that people have been asking for a long time. But you're going to be able to basically share a link out with friends and family. And if they do buy tickets, then you'll get a few tickets or like a fraction of this referral volume as a result. So it's going to be a really fun mechanism to introduce. So the next one is usability. Gas prices. This is something we're all feeling right now. They're brutal. I mean, right now we saw what it's like 40 Gwei or something like that. But even that is higher than it was in the past. Like I remember the days of 4 Gwei, you know, back in the day. And now we're seeing highs of like 120. It's absurd. And so to deposit into PoolTogether recently has been like $12 or even $21. I think we saw a transaction go through. So quite often these deposits are like $50. So having a deposit that's $20 really doesn't mean it's no loss. So we're really working on improving that. So that's going to be a big part of it, is optimizations. Another big part is the instant prize eligibility. So V3 is going to have a brand new token model, a much simpler token model. V2 has this delayed batch minting mechanism, which was really effective to prevent people from gaming the system, but unfortunately it was incredibly complicated to build against if you want to build code against it, because you have to wait until the actual token was minted and then you can do transfers. So you can't just like do a quick exchange and then a transfer right away. It's this, it was a very strange process. So we've really improved that and have this entirely new fairness model that supports that. Also meta transactions out of the box. So we support GSN V2 out of the box. So that'll be nice for people who do want to run meta transactions and sponsor their users. And finally, I put L2 support in here in italics because we don't actually have any support for it yet, but it's something that we're thinking about actively now, given how high gas prices have been. And we have some ideas there that I've been looking into that I'm happy to share, at least at a very sort of hypothetical level after, if you guys are interested. But so the big one is decentralization. This is the main pillar for this next version. So just to fill you guys a little bit in, is that we were, for V2, essentially coming up with a random number ourselves. And while that's all well and good, if we're trustable, which we were, trustworthy rather, ideally we'd like to make this thing as trustless as possible. And so we have a much better RNG source this time, using a combination of the Chainlink VRF and the Starkware BDF, and then as well as being non-custodial. So previously our prize pool was a singular contract that we had the upgrade controls for. So we were able to replace the code that lived at that address with new code. And that effectively is custody, because that means we could replace that code with, you know, some malicious code that steals everyone's funds or something like that. Of course, we're not going to do that, but and now as well, it's behind a multi-sig, so it'd be very difficult for any one person to do that. But for the next version, we're actually, it's the logic has been split into two contracts. There's one, the prize pool, which is immutable and autonomous outside of one function that can be called by governance, which is the emergency shutdown, which actually detaches it from the prize strategy. And users will deposit and withdraw through the prize pool. So funds are never custodied by another contract. Everything always goes through the prize pool. And then the prize pool exposes the interest to a prize strategy contract. And this contract is it's upgradable, and it's controlled by governance. It has a number of different admin controls to manipulate the exit fee, the early exit fee, as well as the time lock duration, which I can speak to after. And it's able to allocate interest to anyone. And so really, the risk has been mitigated to just the interest on the funds in terms of custody. So this is a really, really critical distinction from V2, is that now no one controls the funds. The prize pool is going through audit in a couple of days. And so, yeah, it's going to be a very, very solid piece of code. And that brings us to governance. And this is really cool, because all of this is coming at this perfect time where everyone's thinking about yield farming and liquidity mining. And this is something that we're going to be supporting in V3, is the ability for people to, by virtue of holding PoolTogether tickets, they'll be dripped governance tokens. And so just by being a part of the system, you'll begin to have more and more say in it, which is going to be a lot of fun to implement, because there's a few aspects of the prize strategy that are changeable by governance. And so what we want to do is basically seed the governance tokens to all the users over X number of years, and then allow basically transition to a community controlled protocol. So it's part of the vision that we all have, right? Is to have this peer-to-peer decentralized software. So we're really excited to be moving in that direction. So yeah, on the governance note, we are not, the governance drip isn't starting at the end of August when we launch V3. It'll be starting shortly after. There's a few mechanisms we need to test first to make sure everything's in place. And we also want to put the actual governance proposal system in place. So there's a few things yet to be done. But the machinery is there anyway. And so we have V3 on Coven if you do want to go and create your own prize pool. It uses the default prize strategy. So if you did want to get your hands dirty and really write your own, you would have to just literally fork the contracts. But if you want to play with it, you can go to the builder.pooltogether.com and create your own on Coven. We don't yet have a Ropsten or Rinkeby, but we're getting there. I threw this all together just for this presentation just today, so it's a very, very short notice. But yeah, that's where we're at. So does anybody have any questions? You guys are good to go?
Well, I've got one question that you might have touched on it a little bit, but so you've mentioned yield farming a little bit and governance tokens in some other contexts. Mm-hmm. Compound, for example, comp accrues to or is distributed to lenders and as well as borrowers. How do you think about how comp interacts with the prizes that come from PoolTogether in the current iteration?
Yeah. we believe a lot of our users are aware of comp. And so we are likely going to, for the next version, as sort of an external award, just as we mentioned that you could drop arbitrary ERC20s into the prize pool and have them awarded as part of the prize. We're going to do that with the comp. So you'll be able to win the interest, but also win whatever X number of comp is accrued in the prize pool as well. So it'll be kind of this bundle of prizes versus just being a singular prize that is the interest. So what's interesting about that actually is that the interest becomes more of a fairness check to make sure that everyone has a fair part of the pool. Because once you start loading in NFTs and other prizes, it's less. It almost becomes less about the interest and more about just the fun and fairness of being in this pool. Even though the bulk of the prizes is generated from the interest. So I think it's gonna be fun to play with that and yeah, see how the users react. Maybe they don't care about comp. It'll be interesting to see. Maybe we'll reserve that for a power user, but we'll have the machinery there for that flexibility.
We've got a question from Vishal in the chat. He asks, can we build a banking app using the pool?
A banking app. A banking app to the extent that you take fiat, I'm guessing, and deposit it. Could you elaborate? I'm not sure. I mean, yes, arguably all these smart contracts are banks in themselves because they're all escrow. So it's like, this is the nature of this kind of peer-to-peer banking system. And this is one savings mechanism that you can use. So yes, I would say that yes, you could build this into a bank or make it part of a bank, let's say, or have it as a service, an add-on, something like that. Oh, will the gas tokens there be with Ethereum 2.0? No, we haven't integrated gas tokens. So that perhaps is an exercise for the reader, is to build a wrapper around that can consume and burn gas tokens. It's a really interesting mechanism, but our focus this time was on stripping it down to be as minimal as possible. And it'd be fairly straightforward based on how we've designed the contracts to add a gas token wrapper.
Got one other quick question. I know there's a feature in PoolTogether for people who aren't gambling to contribute funds to the pool that accrues interest. How crucial do you think that is to the appeal? Like for our fork experiment here, do we need a decently sizable matching pool for it to be worthwhile?
Yeah, it does need to be pretty big. I mean, like we've used the sponsorship as a way to bootstrap pools so that you don't see like a $0 prize, because that's not very fun. You want to have something in there. In terms of the economics of it, I mean, this is all just ideas. I speak for myself when I speak about this opinion, but I think it'd be interesting if we let's say align the incentives in the sense that the tickets, when you bought a ticket, would be eligible for the interest because you want the prize. The sponsorship, they forego their interest and they forego their chance to win, but potentially they could accrue the comp that all the other tickets are accruing because they're sort of power users. They know that they just want to farm as much as they can to get as much comp as possible. Likewise for the Aave, perhaps there'd be an Aave token that they accrue as well. So I think it's kind of interesting to be able to play with those economic incentives. We haven't designed it as such yet. We're just building the groundwork and laying it so that we can start to put these mechanisms in place. But I think it would be interesting to kind of give people a reason to sponsor. It's like, if they don't care about interest, if they just want comp, sponsor PoolTogether, because you're effectively capturing, like if sponsorship is half of the tickets, then you're doubling your comp return. So it'd be kind of a worthwhile value prop to them. So yeah.
Any other questions, anyone, before we let Brendan go? Okay, well, thank you so much. That was a super interesting presentation.